Don't! Please! You're embarrassing me in front of my colleagues. Those were the words. 6 words, spoken quietly, almost gently, the way you'd correct a child who'd reached for something they weren't supposed to touch. 6 words from the woman I had spent the last 4 years quietly dismantling my entire life to put through medical school. I'm Cory Lane, and I need to tell you what happened the day my wife became a doctor, because what I did next is the part nobody expected. Not her colleagues, not the dean, not even me. The auditorium had been loud all morning. 400 graduates, 400 families, 400 stories, all colliding inside the same marble-floored hall. I'd driven 2 hours to get there. I'd ironed my shirt twice because the first time I'd left a faint crease across the left shoulder, and I didn't want her to look at me and see someone who hadn't tried. I had white roses, the ones from the florist on Clement Street, the shop she'd pointed at once from a car window 2 years ago, saying those are the good ones, like she was filing it away for a future that didn't include me buying them for her. I'd remembered. I always remembered things she'd long stopped noticing, she said. When they called her name, Zaina Lane, Doctor of Medicine, I stood up. I couldn't stop myself. I whistled. The woman beside me laughed, and I didn't care because Zaina was crossing that stage, and she was radiant, and she was real, and I had watched her cry over rejection letters, watched her study until 2 in the morning at our kitchen table, watched her transform from a brilliant woman who believed in herself just enough into something fully formed and unbreakable, and it had cost me everything, and I would have paid twice. After the ceremony, the lobby filled with noise and heat and perfume, and I pushed through the crowd with the roses pressed against my chest, scanning for her cap, her gown, the particular way she held her shoulders when she was happy. I found her near the tall windows. She was standing with 4 classmates laughing. She looked more alive than I had seen her in months. She turned, she saw me, and something moved across her face. I know her face better than I know my own. I've studied it across breakfast tables and hospital waiting rooms, and the front seat of a truck with rain on the windshield. That fraction of a second, I caught it. It wasn't joy, it wasn't relief. It was something closer to calculation, like a woman briefly running a quiet arithmetic about what my presence was about to cost her. I opened my arms anyway. She stepped back. Don't, please. You're embarrassing me in front of my colleagues. I lowered my arms. The lobby kept moving. Music kept playing. Nobody else heard it. But something in me went very still, the way a room goes still after a door slams. Not silent, just changed. The air, different. I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out the envelope I had been carrying for 9 months. I placed it in her hand without a word. Then I turned and walked toward the exit. Please, before I continue, kindly like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories. I was almost at the door when I heard her laugh again. I didn't turn around. I just heard it. That bright, social laugh she'd developed somewhere in her 2nd year. The one that sounded like the old Zaina but with all the rough edges smoothed off, all the realness buffed out of it until it gleamed like something decorative. I kept walking, past the families taking photographs, past the table with the sparkling water and the untouched fruit platters, past a graduate crying into her mother's shoulder, her mother's hand moving in slow circles on her back, the way hands do when words are not enough. I didn't have a mother doing that for me. I didn't have anyone in that lobby on my side of it. I had driven 2 hours alone, ironed my shirt alone, bought flowers alone, and I was now walking out alone. And the honest truth is that none of that was new. I had been alone in this for a long time. I had just been too busy keeping the lights on to sit still long enough to feel it. What I didn't know, what I couldn't see from the door, was what was happening behind me. Adaz had watched the whole thing. Zaina had told me about Adaz once, early in her 1st year. Sharp, she'd said, daughter of a judge. The kind of woman who notices everything and says only what is necessary and never wastes a word. I had never met her properly. I had no idea she had been watching me since I walked into that lobby. I had no idea she had been watching us for longer than that. She turned to Zaina the moment I was out of earshot. Is he okay? Zaina tucked the envelope into her gown pocket. He's fine. He just gets like that. Like what? Sensitive. A Daisy was quiet. That particular quality of quiet that asks more than words do. He came to campus last February, she said finally. During your clinical block, a Tuesday, he brought lunch for you in a bag from that place you like on Garfield Street. The security guard told me because he remembered it. Said the man waited outside for 20 minutes, then found out you were with an attending, and left without coming inside. Left the food at the desk, didn't leave a note, didn't ask anyone to tell you he'd been there. Zaina's hand stilled inside her pocket, fingers resting against the envelope. He does things, Adais said, that most people only do in stories. The crowd surged briefly, someone calling for a group photograph, someone else laughing too loudly near the entrance, and the moment broke apart at its edges. Zaina's name was called, and she moved, the way she always moved when a room redirected her, fluidly and without resistance, but her hand didn't leave her pocket. Her fingers stayed wrapped around that envelope, the way you hold something you are not ready to open, but cannot bring yourself to put down. She moved through the crowd, pressing it against her palm like a wound she wasn't ready to look at yet, and I was already in the parking lot, sitting in my truck, staring at nothing, doing what I had been doing for 3 years. Waiting, still, quietly. 3 years before that lobby, I sat across from a man in a gray suit and signed my name 11 times. The company I had built from a second-hand truck and 6 years of 12-hour days, Lane & Sons, named after the legacy I intended to leave, transferred ownership in 30 days. On the drive home, I sat through a green light without moving. The car behind me honked. I didn't hear it. That night, Zaina was on the phone with her mother. I made dinner. When she came to the table, I told her quietly that the school had approved her for a full scholarship. She screamed. She grabbed my face in both hands and kissed me so hard my chair scraped back. She cried. She said, "I can't believe it. I can't believe it," over and over while I held her and stared at the wall above her head. I had one thought. She's going to become a doctor. I carried that thought like a stone and like a light simultaneously, something heavy that also somehow kept me warm all the way through 3 years of night shifts. Through every Tuesday appointment, through every silent drive home, it was enough. It had to be enough. The faculty mixer was in March of her second year. I drove 2.5 hours in rain. I bought a new shirt. I stood at the edge of a room full of people talking about research grants and fellowships, and I smiled and held a glass of water because the wine list confused me, and I was not going to embarrass her. A senior professor approached and turned to me warmly. "And who is this?" Zaina smiled. "My husband. From back home." From back home. Like a place she'd passed through. Like a chapter with the spine already cracked. The professor shook my hand and said, "Wonderful to meet you," and I smiled all evening. I was pleasant. I asked good questions. I laughed at the right moments. In the car, she fell asleep within 10 minutes. I drove in silence for 2 hours. At a toll booth near our exit, while waiting for the barrier to lift, I quietly removed my father's watch, the one I'd worn every day since I was 19, the one that reminded me where I came from and why I worked, and placed it in the glove compartment. It didn't fit anymore. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that. I was looking for the jerk chicken recipe she'd saved because her mother's birthday was coming and I wanted to cook it for her. I had been planning it for 2 weeks. The tablet lit up when I touched it. I caught 2 lines before I could look away. Honestly, I think I married too young. I didn't know who I was yet. I read it once, then again. Then I placed the tablet face down, gently, like it was made of something that would shatter. I made dinner. I waited for her call. When she called at 8, I asked how her day went, and she told me about a complicated patient case, and I listened to every single word and asked follow-up questions and made her laugh. I did not mention what I'd read. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd once called a scholarship what was actually a sacrifice, and I opened my laptop. I started writing. I know something has shifted between us. 9 months later, that letter was in her pocket. She still hadn't opened it. The cardiologist had the calm-faced doctor's practice. "Mr. Lane, this isn't a death sentence, but it is a serious conversation." He explained the condition, the medication, the trajectory with and without management. I nodded at all the correct moments. "Do you have a spouse who should be part of this?" "My wife," I said. "She's in medical school." He paused with something like admiration. She'll understand this better than most. That's exactly why I can't tell her. He looked at me. She just entered 3rd year, I said. If I tell her she comes home, she insists on being here, and I didn't sell my company and work nights so she could come home to manage my health. Silence. That is, he said slowly, either the most loving thing I've ever heard or the most stubborn. Probably both, I said. I paid in cash. I started medication on a Tuesday. I kept every appointment on a Tuesday. I told Zaina on those mornings that I was at a site inspection. I hadn't been a contractor in 3 years. She never questioned it. I told myself that was because she trusted me. Graduation morning, I was dressed by 7:15, ironed my shirt twice, bought the roses from Clement Street, those are the good ones, and rewrapped them 3 times because the paper kept tearing. Envelope in my left pocket, medication in my right. Zaina came downstairs at 7:45 already on her phone. She held up one finger, "Give me a minute," and walked to the kitchen. The minute became 15. I sat on the stairs, held the roses across my knees, listened to her laugh. At 8:10 she appeared in the doorway with her keys. "Let's go. We're going to be late." "You look beautiful," I said. She was already walking to the car. In the car she stayed on the phone until we pulled into the parking lot. When she hung up, she glanced at the roses, almost surprised. "Did you get those for me?" "Yeah," I said. "That's sweet." She was already opening the door. I sat in the car a moment after she got out, took my medication without water, picked up the flowers. Then I followed her in. I heard the whistle. I was crossing the stage, diploma extended, cameras flashing, and somewhere in the 3rd row, above all the polite applause, one man was whistling, loud, unashamed, the kind of whistle that forgets entirely where it is because it is too busy being proud. I knew exactly who it was. I kept my eyes forward. In the lobby afterward, I watched him move toward me through the crowd. White roses, that shirt, eyes bright in a way that made my chest do something complicated I didn't have words for yet. I thought about Adaise's table, the department chair, Dr. Williams who had written my recommendation. I stepped back. "Don't, please, you're embarrassing me in front of my colleagues." And his eyes, I almost looked away, but I didn't, and I have not stopped thinking about this since. His eyes didn't flash with anger, didn't go cold. They simply lowered, like a light being turned down, not off. He handed me the envelope. He turned. I held it in both hands. I did not call after him, but I also couldn't move. He was 30 feet from the exit when the dean's voice came through the lobby speakers. "Before we conclude, we have one final recognition." I watched him slow. "We acknowledge an anonymous supporter who made an extraordinary personal sacrifice to see a student through these doors, and who then donated the last of what he had to fund a scholarship so others could follow, 20 feet from the door. If Mr. Cory Lane is still in the building, we'd ask him to come forward." He stopped. The lobby went quiet in patches, silence spreading outward like rings on water as people heard the name and turned. Adaise turned, I turned. Cory stood with his back to the room for 3 full seconds. Still. The way he went still in that car on graduation morning. The way I now understood he'd been going still for years, absorbing things quietly, alone, without asking anyone to notice. Then slowly, like a man who had been dreading and expecting this in equal measure, he turned around. The roses were still in his hand. The envelope was in mine. I had not opened it yet, but my fingers had stopped being still. He didn't look at me when he walked onto that stage. I stood in the crowd and watched the dean take both his hands and guide him to the podium, and the whole room leaned in, and I leaned in, and I was gripping the envelope so tightly the paper was beginning to give at the corner. 4 years ago, the dean said, Mr. Lane enrolled his wife in this institution under the pretense that she had received a scholarship. What she didn't know was that he was the scholarship. He sold his business, worked nights for 3 years, hid a heart condition so she wouldn't leave school to care for him, then donated the remainder to ensure the next student like her would never be turned away at the door. The room was absolutely silent. We named it the Lane Medical Scholarship. He asked us not to. We didn't ask. Quiet laughter. Then applause that built slowly, the way real applause does when it's coming from somewhere true. Cory stood at the podium staring downward, jaw tight, pressing his lips together the way he does when he is refusing to come apart in public. He still had not looked at me. I understood why. I tore open the envelope. The photograph came out first. I recognized it immediately and also couldn't place it. That particular confusion of a memory you lived but never witnessed. Our first apartment kitchen. Me, holding my MCAT score sheet in both hands, eyes still wet from crying before I'd looked, the night everything either started or ended depending on how the numbers fell. I didn't remember him taking this. He was in the background, blurred, mid-motion, dish towel in hand, grinning, not at the camera, not performing, just grinning. The way a man grins when he is watching something impossible become real and cannot believe he gets to be in the same room as it. He had kept this in his wallet for 7 years. My hand was already shaking when I got to the letter. I know something has shifted between us. I don't know if it's fixable. But every Tuesday appointment I kept alone, I would keep again. Every night shift, every sacrifice. I would do it without blinking. Whatever you decide about us, you are a doctor now. That was always supposed to happen. I'm glad I got to be part of how it did. I looked up. A daisy said one word. Go. I stopped calculating and I moved. Not gracefully, not the way I had learned to move in 4 years of becoming someone polished and composed in rooms full of polished, composed people. I moved the way I had moved before all of that, urgently, honestly, without performance. I reached the stage steps. The dean saw me coming and stepped aside. I walked to the podium. My cap was tilted. My eyes were burning. I was still holding the photograph. The room was completely silent. I stopped my husband from hugging me tonight, I said. My voice cracked on the word husband, in front of all of you, because I was afraid the people I wanted to impress would see that I came from nothing. I looked down at the photograph. He sold his company to get me here, worked nights for 3 years, hid a heart condition from his wife, a medical student, because he didn't want me to come home. I laughed once, broken. I almost let the most extraordinary person I have ever known walk out that door because I was too busy becoming someone I thought was better. I looked up. He was 6 feet away, still holding his certificate, holding it the way you hold something you don't quite believe you deserve. He was looking at me now, that same quiet, undimmed thing in his eyes, the thing that had never gone out, not once. I opened my arms. He stepped into them. He held me the way you hold something you have been practicing releasing, tightly, completely, with every quiet year of it folded in. I pressed my face into his shoulder and said the only true thing I had said all day. I see you. I see everything. I'm so sorry. Cory Lane said nothing. He just held on,